Welcome to the deep dive. I am so excited you're joining us today because we are looking at two things that seem completely unrelated.
Completely unrelated.
Right, but as you're about to see, they collide in the most spectacular way. Today we are looking at the fascinating, often misunderstood world of fidgeting, and we're pairing it, quite literally, with the high-end, sophisticated science of wine tasting.
It is quite the combination.
Yeah.
And the stack of sources we have to work with today is incredibly diverse.
We really went all over the map for you. We have a stack of medical and psychological research papers breaking down exactly why human beings fidget.
Looking really closely at its connections to ADHD, stress relief.
And even weight management, which blew my mind. We also have some fascinating 2026 e-commerce market research looking at the booming multi-billion-dollar drop shipping industry for fidget toys.
Right?
Then we pivot to anacenological or, wine science guides. This includes some dense but amazing case studies from the Australian Wine Research Institute on the precise chemistry of wine aeration.
And finally, we're looking at the product specifications and influencer campaigns for a very specific product.
Yes, the Crystocraft spinning wine glass, specifically the Bordeaux edition.
Which brings us to the core mission of this deep dive. We are going to explore the surprisingly complex hardwired science behind why we actually like to fidget.
Yeah.
We want to discover how this natural physiological urge is colliding with the refined traditional world of wine tasting.
Specifically, we're going to examine why that Crystocraft spinning wine glass serves as much more than just a party novelty.
Exactly. We're looking at how it actually acts as the ultimate executive fidget tool for adults.
Okay, let's unpack this, starting with the science of fidgeting itself.
Mm.
Because I think we all have this ingrained idea, probably from grade school, that fidgeting is inherently bad.
Oh, absolutely.
It's dismissed as bad behavior, a lack of discipline, or just a complete lack of attention. You get told to sit still, stop tapping your foot, stop clicking your pen.
But science is actively trying to correct that massive misconception.
Yeah.
Fidgeting is not a failure of attention. It's actually a highly sophisticated self-regulation mechanism. Your body is doing it for a very specific reason.
Which is fascinating.
If we look at the cognitive and physiological benefits highlighted in the research, there's a pivotal 2005 study out of the University of Hertfordshire that looked at how fidgeting impacts learning.
And they found that it actively lowers cortisol levels, right?
Yes, exactly. It lowers cortisol.
And because fidgeting lowers that cortisol, it stops the stress hormone from actively interfering with your working memory and cognitive processing.
The researchers actually mapped this out. By lowering cortisol through physical movement, the people who were allowed to fidget consistently improved their performance on memory tests.
Wow.
The movement provided an outlet for the stress, freeing up the brain's cognitive load to focus on the task at hand.
Which makes perfect sense when you think about it.
It relates to a concept in psychology known as displacement behaviors. These are those subconscious physical actions, pulling at your collar, scratching your arm, or spinning a pen in your fingers.
The sources mention a really fascinating study about displacement behaviors involving mental arithmetic. And I have to say, it sounds like an absolute nightmare scenario.
Oh, it really does. They essentially designed a scenario to induce maximum social anxiety.
Yeah.
Researchers made volunteers perform complex mental arithmetic out loud while standing in front of a group of strangers who were silently judging them.
Just reading the methodology of that study made me want to start pacing.
I know, right? But the results were incredibly revealing about how our bodies cope with that real-time pressure.
Because the individuals who exhibited more displacement behaviors, picking at themselves, shifting their weight, tapping their fingers, actually reported feeling less stressed in the moment.
Compared to those who stood perfectly still, yes. The physical action of the displacement behavior successfully reduced their real-time anxiety.
It serves as a biological pressure release valve.
Precisely. And as an interesting anomaly in the data, men actually show twice the amount of these displacement behaviors as women do during stressful experiences.
That is wild to think about. Your body just installs its own coping mechanism without you even realizing it.
Completely subconsciously.
But it gets even crazier when you look at how fidgeting impacts weight management. The sources referred to fidgeting as nature's Fitbit.
Nature's Fitbit, yeah.
And there's a legendary 2000 study published in the journal Science that proves it.
That study is an absolute classic in metabolic research, and the methodology is incredibly intense.
They took a group of healthy, non-obese volunteers and deliberately overfed them by 1,000 calories a day.
For 8 straight weeks.
Just think about that for a second. That is essentially forcing yourself to eat an entire extra heavy meal every single day for 2 months.
You would assume the weight gain across the board would be massive and uniform.
Right. But the human body is incredibly resilient and constantly seeking equilibrium. The bodies of the participants fought back against the overfeeding.
Some people gained vastly less weight than others, and the determining factor was subconscious fidgeting.
It's amazing.
The people who unconsciously increased their random movements, posture changes, and muscle tensing managed to keep a significant amount of the weight off.
The statistics on the calorie burn from these tiny movements are staggering.
The data shows that simply fidgeting while sitting increases the calories you burn by 29% compared to sitting completely still.
29% just from moving your leg or shifting around.
And if you're standing and fidgeting, that jumps to a 38% increase. Throughout the course of a day, those tiny, seemingly insignificant movements can account for burning an extra 100 to 800 calories entirely as heat energy.
So we have stress relief, we have memory improvement, we have weight management, but we really need to dive deep into fidgeting and ADHD.
Yes.
Because this is where the research is perhaps the most robust, and it totally reframes how we think about attention.
For individuals with attention deficit hyperactivity disorder, fidgeting is deeply tied to the neurological underpinnings of the condition. In people with ADHD, there are often functional differences in the brain structure, particularly in the prefrontal cortex, which is the area responsible for attention, executive function, and impulse control.
So when someone with ADHD is sitting in a tedious, understimulating environment, their prefrontal cortex isn't getting the engagement it needs to stay alert.
Exactly. Fidgeting essentially acts as a manual override to stimulate those exact areas of the brain. It regulates alertness.
It wakes it up.
If the brain is falling asleep at the wheel, the physical movement of fidgeting provides the necessary sensory input to wake the brain up and allow it to focus on that monotonous task.
The sources bring up Dr. Roland Rotz, who makes a really important distinction here that I think is crucial for you to understand if you're listening to this.
Yes, the difference between a toy and a tool.
Right. He clearly differentiates between a fidget toy and a fidget tool.
It is a vital distinction because the two are often conflated. A fidget toy is something used for entertainment, play, or direct stimulation.
It actively demands your attention.
Think of playing a quick game on your smartphone, or messing with a bright, noisy, flashing spinner. It pulls your focus away from the primary task.
Whereas a fidget tool is used specifically for self-regulation.
Yes.
It's designed to be a background activity that actually improves your focus on something else, like doodling in the margins of a notebook while listening to a lecture.
You're focusing on the doodle. The doodling is just occupying the restless part of your brain so you can actually hear what the professor is saying.
Dr. Rotz frames this around the concept of rhythmic sensory stimulation.
Whether that input is visual, auditory, or kinesthetic, a predictable, rhythmic physical action can actively assist cognitive processing.
You're satisfying the brain's craving for sensory input, which then allows the executive function to get to work without distraction.
Absolutely.
And this need for sensory regulation is absolutely not just for kids in a classroom. That brings us to the e-commerce market research for 2026.
The numbers are huge.
Fidget toys and tools have exploded into an $8.5 billion global market, and it's projected to hit a massive $14.78 billion by 2032. And a major driver of that growth is adults.
The market data specifically isolates a consumer persona they call the executive buyer.
These are office workers, managers, and professionals who are dealing with the modern workplace's immense cognitive load.
We're talking about back-to-back Zoom meetings, constant screen time, endless notifications.
And this chronic low-level anxiety that just hums in the background of corporate life.
These adults desperately need stress relief tools to manage that load, but they face a social barrier.
Right, they can't sit in a high-stakes board meeting clipping a bright neon plastic toy or spinning a noisy gadget.
It undermines their professional presence.
So the executive buyer is looking for something silent, low noise, sleek, and modern.
They need a tool that looks professional, but still provides that necessary tactile or visual sensory input to prevent their anxious thoughts from spiraling when they're sitting through a 2-hour budget review.
They need a sophisticated way to self-regulate.
And the market research shows they're willing to pay premium prices for high-quality materials, metals, glass, elegant designs that blend seamlessly into a mature adult environment.
While still providing that biological pressure release valve.
Precisely.
Here's where it gets really interesting because we're about to pivot from the stressful boardroom to the relaxing dining room.
The fun part?
Right. So we know this executive buyer needs discreet stress relief in the office. But what happens when that same anxious executive leaves work and goes to a high-stakes corporate dinner?
They can't bring a desk toy?
Exactly. They're usually holding a drink. Which brings us to the wine.
To understand the connection here, we first have to look at the mechanics of wine tasting, specifically the concept of letting a wine breathe.
Which brings us to the great uncorking myth.
Oh, yes.
I know I have been guilty of this. You buy a nice bottle of red wine, you pop the cork, you leave the bottle sitting on the kitchen counter for half an hour, and you proudly announce to your guests that you're letting it breathe.
But the inistological sources are very clear on this. That does absolutely nothing.
Nothing at all.
It's entirely a psychological comfort. Because the bottleneck is so incredibly narrow, only a fraction of a teaspoon of the wine is actually coming into contact with the air.
So for wine to truly breathe, it needs significant surface area.
It needs meaningful exposure to oxygen.
So what is actually happening chemically when we properly expose wine to air? The sources talk about oxidation and evaporation.
Oxidation is the process where oxygen physically interacts with the wine's compounds.
Okay.
This is particularly important for softening the harsh edges of the alcohol and breaking down rigid tannins.
And tannins are those compounds that give young red wines that dry, sometimes bitter, mouth-puckering feel?
Exactly. Oxidation smooths those out, creating a silkier, much more integrated texture on the palate.
Okay, so oxidation softens the harsh edges. But what about the smell? Sometimes you open a young bottle and it hits you with this harsh ethanol scent, or almost a matchstick smell.
That's where the second reaction comes, in evaporation.
Just like a boiling pot of water releases steam.
Exposing wine to air allows less desirable, highly volatile compounds to evaporate. Those matchstick smells are often sulfites, and the harsh chemical smells are ethanol vapors.
As those unwanted elements burn off and evaporate into the air, the hidden, complex layers of flavor and aroma are finally allowed to emerge.
So just like the human brain needs the physical movement of fidgeting to wake up and focus, the wine needs the physical agitation of air to wake up its flavor profile.
That's such a great parallel. But the sources are careful to point out that not all wines need this aggressive treatment. You have to know what you're pouring.
The wines that benefit the most from aggressive aeration are your bold reds, Cabernet Sauvignon, Syrah, Malbec, and Bordeaux.
Because they have the robust, heavy structure to handle the oxygen.
Also, very young wines that are tightly wound need that air to open up and show their true character.
Conversely, you have to be very careful with delicate wines. A light Pinot Noir, or very old, fragile vintage, needs incredibly gentle, measured aeration.
Right. If you expose an old, delicate wine to too much oxygen too quickly, you'll essentially flatline it. You'll dull its unique nuances and strip away its character in a matter of minutes.
It is a really delicate balance. Interestingly, oxygen is actually a tool used way before the bottle is ever opened.
If we look at the Australian Wine Research Institute case studies in our sources, they detail how winemakers use aeration during the actual fermentation process.
I was reading about that, and it sounds like a massive shift in winemaking philosophy. Traditionally, oxygen was seen as the absolute enemy during fermentation.
But for a long time, yes. But the AWRI data shows winemakers are now using things called venturis or inline centers.
Which are basically specialized valves, right?
Yes, valves to inject air right into the fermentation vats. This prevents the wine from developing what they call reductive traits.
Which is just a fancy entomological term for when wine is starved of oxygen and starts smelling a bit like sulfur or a swamp.
Exactly. Injecting that air mitigates the swampy character and actually boosts the expression of those bright red fruit notes we love.
So oxygen is an essential building block of flavor, from the fermentation vat all the way to your glass.
Which brings us to the perfect synthesis of everything we've talked about today.
Yes, the intersection of the executive buyer's deep psychological need for a high-end fidget tool and the chemical necessity of aerating a bold red wine.
Enter the Crystocraft spinning wine glass, specifically the Bordeaux edition.
On the surface, it is a highly engineered wine aerator, but functionally, it secretly serves as a soothing luxury fidget tool for the modern adult.
It really does.
I was looking at the actual design of this glass and the product specs, and it clearly isn't a standard piece of stemware. How does that spinning mechanism actually function without spilling Bordeaux all over a white tablecloth?
It comes down to a highly engineered base. They have integrated a patented bearing directly into the bottom of the glass.
A bearing in a wine glass.
Yes. This specialized bearing allows the entire glass to spin in a smooth, highly controlled motion. It isn't a wobbly, precarious spin at all.
The product specifications state it spins for 1 to 2 minutes, but their own testing videos capture the glass spinning effortlessly, maintaining its balance for over 180 seconds on a single, gentle push.
Over 3 minutes of spinning.
And the materials themselves feel very targeted toward that executive buyer persona we talked about. It's made from durable, lead-free borosilicate crystal glass, which provides absolute clarity.
The craftsmanship is incredibly precise. The lip thickness of the glass is refined down to exactly 0.8 millimeters.
Which is crucial for the tactile sensation of a premium sipping experience. It just feels expensive.
And it sits on this anodized aluminum base, which gives it a modern heavyweight.
You can get the base in silver, a rose pink or gold, or a black gunmetal finish. Plus, the aluminum ring is adorned with 8 Swarovski crystals.
It catches the light beautifully when it spins. It really screams luxury and sophistication.
But that luxury serves a very specific mechanical purpose. Let's look at the aeration benefit first. Traditionally, if you want to properly aerate a bold Bordeaux, you have to pour it into a massive clumsy decanter and wait an hour.
The spinning motion of the Crystocraft glass replaces the decanter entirely.
When you give the glass a gentle spin, it creates a mesmerizing dynamic swirl inside the bowl.
This rapid, continuous motion forcefully mixes the wine with oxygen, opening up the bouquet, burning off the ethanol, and softening the tannins in a matter of minutes, right in your individual glass.
What's fascinating here is how this mechanical aeration connects directly back to the ADHD and psychological research we discussed earlier.
Yes, the fidgeting benefit. It operates as a fully functional displacement behavior.
Think back to Dr. Rotz's concept of rhythmic sensory stimulation.
The swirling motion of the dark wine inside the spinning glass acts as what psychologists call a visual fidget.
A visual fidget.
It provides a dynamic, predictable, rhythmic visual stimulus. Watching the wine swirl in a perfect circle and watching those Swarovski crystals catch the ambient light occupies the restless part of the brain.
It actively improves sustained attention.
It is the ultimate stealth fidget tool.
Imagine you're at that high-pressure corporate dinner party, or you're on a very stressful first date. You have pent-up nervous energy. You're dealing with social anxiety.
You cannot bounce your leg under the table without shaking the room.
And you certainly cannot pull out a plastic desk toy. But giving your crystal wine glass a gentle, continuous spin, that looks incredibly sophisticated.
It allows the anxious adult a socially acceptable way to release physical energy, regulate their arousal levels, and soothe their social anxiety without ever annoying the other guests.
It's displacement behavior elevated to an art form.
You're literally lowering your cortisol while simultaneously improving the chemical flavor profile of your Cabernet.
And the influencer culture around this glass proves exactly how dual purpose it is. It's going viral, and not just among traditional wine connoisseurs.
People are treating it like a high-end skill toy.
The sources highlight campaigns where influencers are doing spin and flip tricks. You have professional bartenders like Oz in the UK and Andy Pincott executing these flawless one-finger hold tricks while the glass is spinning upside down.
It engages that same trend-driven tactile satisfaction that made traditional fidget spinners go viral a few years ago, but it's entirely packaged and designed for adults.
But the quote that really seals it for me comes from a wine influencer named Emma Hodges in the UK.
Her review was so insightful.
When she reviewed the glass, she didn't just talk about the softened tannins or the speed of the aeration. She explicitly praised it for fidgeting and social connection.
She recognized immediately that the true value of the glass was the soothing, tactile experience it provided her hands and her brain while she was navigating a social setting.
She intuitively understood the psychological benefit.
It's a brilliant example of a product that caters to our human physiology rather than asking us to suppress it.
We're hardwired to move to relieve stress.
Instead of forcing consumers to fight that urge in formal high-pressure settings, this design encourages it and elegantly ties it to a functional benefit for the beverage itself.
So, what does this all mean? We started by looking at why we tap our feet, spin our pens, and scratch our arms. And we ended up aerating a Bordeaux in a spinning crystal glass.
Quite the journey.
What we have learned is that fidgeting is not a character flaw. It is a vital subconscious tool our bodies use to regulate our stress hormones, manage our weight, and sharpen our attention.
And the demand for these tools is so incredibly high that the adult market for them is exploding into the billions.
And rather than suppressing this natural urge to move, we can find ways to elevate it.
If we connect this to the bigger picture, true innovation happens when we design products that honor human nature rather than fight it.
The Crystocraft glass is successful because it acknowledges that the modern adult is often anxious, overstimulated, and carrying a heavy cognitive load.
It doesn't just make the wine taste better. It gives the user a beautiful, discreet, and tactile way to find their focus and calm their nerves in the middle of a chaotic world.
It is the perfect marriage of form, function, and psychology, which leaves you with something to ponder long after this deep dive ends.
I'm curious to hear it.
We now know that dynamic movement unlocks the absolute best qualities in both humans, through the self-regulation of fidgeting, and in wine, through the chemical process of aeration.
Okay.
If movement is the hidden key to unlocking potential in both us and our beverages, what other static, traditional, stubbornly still rituals in your daily life are just waiting to be spun in an entirely new direction?
It definitely makes you look at your environment and your own habits in a completely different way.
It really does. Thank you so much for joining us on this deep dive. Keep moving, keep exploring, and we will catch you next time.